Start this recording. Rolling start.
Nice. I love it. Love it. I spent some time, went through your Cash for Connections.
Oh, the
Good.
workshop I did?
Yep, good stuff.
Oh, you
I
enjoyed it.
am
Good.
using it as like a forcing function to get me to start producing some content and start networking.
Okay, great.
Thanks, John,
Thank you.
for the swift kick in the arse.
Okay.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, it's good, man. Could always use more networking, more easy clients, especially if I'm going to try to branch out and do more fractional CMO consulting type stuff. So
Yes. I mean,
appreciate it, man.
it really does work. I was in a Facebook group this morning where business owner was asking questions about what they should be thinking about hiring somebody to do Facebook ads. I told them the model I use. I told them what they should look out for. I said, avoid anybody who tries to get you into a multi-month contract. Anyone who's competent doesn't need a multi-month contract. They don't need to handcuff their clients.
Yeah.
Told them what else I tell them. Yeah. If you're doing Facebook ads, you should see results within 7 days, or it's obviously not going to work out. If it's Google ads within 30 days, you should not going to work out.
Yeah.
And anyone who claims that like they're still testing after that period of time, it's just BS. And yeah, just like giving it a little bit of information and help. Oh, I also told them, hey, you should do some ads yourself. At least that way, when you talk to an agency rep, you can feel a little bit better informed, and you've got more relevant questions to ask them. But out of like leaving that post, somebody DM'd me and said, hey, I want to know about what you do. And we didn't even have to have a call. I just told him, I offered him a little free trial for 7 days. He's like, yeah, I'm game. Let's do this. Let's start tomorrow.
Love it. What industry?
Solar.
Okay. All right. Here in the States?
In New Jersey.
Gotta watch out for those people from New Jersey, man. I'm kidding.
You're gonna get some angry comments on this video now, Dave.
Yeah. I'm kidding. One of my closest friends born and raised in New Jersey. Nothing but love. Nothing but love.
Okay. Tell people who you are.
Yeah, my name's Dave Greenlee. Marketing consultant. Man, how much of a backstory do you want? Primarily just do consulting these days. I work, at least currently, almost specifically within financial products, insurance, wealth strategists, that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, have worked in virtually every niche that you could probably imagine. Literally basket weaving.
Really?
Oh yeah, bags for knitting, MMOGs, massive multiplayer online games, obviously infopreneurs, those sorts of things. Anywhere from 6-figure revenues up to mid 8-figure revenues. I've worked as copy consultant. I've worked as the copywriter. I've worked as the lead strategist. I've been an email copywriter. Yeah, you name it. I've done most of it from a copy and consulting standpoint.
How'd you get your start?
Oh, all right. Way back in the day, so it'd been the early 2000s. I started a real estate investment business, buying almost predominantly pre-foreclosed homes. So as I tell the story, you kind of piece together the tactics, I guess you could say, as a marketer. So I was using, my audience was just pre-foreclosed people. So people who were getting ready to have their house foreclosed on. This was public information. So I would look it up through the courthouse records. It would give me a property description. I would then cross-reference that with the tax assessor's office, and I would find an actual owner name and a physical address. So I would write letters, handwritten letters, because in the county that I was in at the time, there were no more than 12, 15 a day, something like that. And I would handwrite these letters, and then I would go knock on the doors. If they were there, I'd hand it to them and start the conversation at that point. And then if I didn't get a chance to talk to them, I left it at their doorstep, and then I put the same letter in the mail. So I knew if I sent something out the day of at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I knew that it would hit the very next day. And in the very beginning, I had everything going to my cell phone number. So that was the very beginning of it. That was my lead generation, all that sort of stuff. I did that for a long time. I actually sold that business in 2019. So I started in 2004 2004, late 2004, made my first offer on a piece of property.
Mm-hmm.
Sold that business in 2019. But what it had turned into was massive amounts of postcards, segmented lists, pre-foreclosures, divorces, evictions. If there was a problem that was attached to a property owner, they got a piece of mail from me with a different verbiage, went to a segmented 800 number with a different pre-qualifying message. And then that person could leave a voicemail and I would call them back and close the deal. So that's where it was from a marketing perspective by the time I was done with it.
Did your operations, your marketing operations, did they sophisticate as the market sophisticated, or was it just a necessary byproduct of growing that business?
Yeah, it was just because I had to take me out of the equation, if that makes sense. I mean, I had a lot of hustle, a lot of drive. I wanted to do a lot of work, but I mean, I know my capacities and I know my weaknesses. And if I was sending a bunch of random phone calls to my cell phone number, I might miss a call. I might forget to call somebody back. So one, I needed more volume because I needed to do more deals. So I needed to send more pieces. And then two, I needed to systemize the operations so I could take myself out of it and make sure the deals actually got done. Does that make sense?
By the time you were done with it and selling it, were you operating, had it become like a call center operation at that point?
No, not at all. Yeah, this is a whole nother story in and of itself. So the peak of that business was probably 2010, 2011. The recession, I don't know how bad it hit you guys over there, but it
Pretty
was
bad.
here.
Pretty bad.
Yeah. And when the recession hit, I mean, that was at its peak. I mean, I was talking to 80 to 100 sellers a month. I was tied into one of the wealthiest people in North Central Florida, is where I was at the time. So the peak was 2010-ish. And no, it was just me. I was the sales guy. I was putting together the deals. I just wasn't the finance guy. So when I talk about working in finances, insurance products, wealth strategist, it's all the stuff that I learned from my business partner during those days. He was incredibly well.
So
But no, to answer your question, it was just me. So I would get all of the leads to my email, and I would set aside time every single day to go through the cold leads and then follow up and close deals with the people who really wanted to move forward.
And so your partner brought the financial muscle to the table to be able to actually so you had cash waiting to buy those properties.
Absolutely. Yep. So I could back up what I was saying in my postcard and voicemail messages. Yep.
That's a pretty typical stumbling block for people wanting to get into real estate, isn't it? Having the financial muscle to take down those first few deals.
Yeah, well, 100%. I mean, I think that somebody trying to get started, and I would say this for anybody in any industry, you should probably go work for somebody who does exactly what it is that you want to do, so they can help you get a few reps under your belt. So if you are going to, you have to have a reason why somebody would want to do business with you, right? So I wasn't the only person offering to purchase somebody's house that was in trouble. One of the most enticing benefits was we had real cash and we really could close in a matter of 10 days. But everybody says that, very few people could actually do that. So if you are just getting started in real estate, even if it's not to purchase, even if you're not going to buy it, you should have your exit strategy pretty well fleshed out. Meaning you should be able to move the contract if you're just flipping in contract, but you need to have those buyers in place in order to do that. Or just go sell yourself into a mess and figure it out. It's kind of what I did, but in retrospect, I would set up the infrastructure first. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
How did you develop that partnership?
That was actually networking.
Thought so.
Plus one for John. Yeah, that was networking. I was doing so much, meaning like I had so many deals that I was trying to look through. A really good friend of mine ran a fitness business, and my partner was a client of my buddy. So he would come in for personal training twice a week. And my buddy just said, hey, I think my partner was asking about real estate or just talking about how hot real estate was. And my buddy just said, hey, I've got a friend. His name is Dave. Here's what he's doing in the market. You guys should have a conversation. So that's how that one started.
So he brought the money and you brought the hustle.
That's exactly right. I kind of had the systems in place to be able to do the transactions, and he had the money sitting on the sidelines wanting to get in the game.
I love it.
Yep.
Nice combination.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. I say a lot that that was by far the best partnership that I've had up until this point. He was way older than he was 73 when I met him. He could have retired decades before me ever meeting him. Just the knowledge, both from like a life wisdom standpoint, deal structuring standpoint, how business works, finances, all that sort of stuff. It was an incredibly impactful partnership for me. Yep.
And you sold that business in 2019?
I did. He passed away.
Sorry to hear that.
He had
Rest in
sons
peace.
that were, what's that?
I said, rest in peace.
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful guy. Was to me at least. So when he passed away, his 50% of the business went to his two sons. And I had, still have a decent relationship with them, but it just wasn't the same. They saw it going a different direction. And to be honest with you, it really wasn't that active of a business. We were just maintaining the portfolio we had, cash flow was good, etc. So they just wanted to sell off the assets, and I was happy to be done with it as well. So I sold my part of the business to his sons.
And then in more recent years, you kind of got into marketing for the insurance industry. Is that right?
Yep. Yep. So same fundamentals and processes that he and I would use to structure companies, structure the deals, we didn't raise money. We raised money directly from his trust. So just how to properly structure entities, insurance, whole life insurance, that sort of stuff. I just went that direction. It wasn't a linear route, as most things aren't. But yeah, that's what I ended up doing. When the recession hit, man, I was bleeding money. I mean, hand over fist, just bleeding money in the real estate industry. So I just needed to stop the bleeding. And I knew I was good at marketing, so I just started a local agency. So I just went to local business owners that I knew, and my pitch was this: hey, I can get your phone to ring. I guarantee you I can get your phone to ring. So with a little bit of persuasion and a little bit of trust, I brought on like 2 or 3 clients in the first maybe 60 days that I went out to try to start that business. And that's how the whole marketer for hire thing started. Was out of necessity. I just needed to stop the bleeding from one business to help the other.
You then, when you market for insurance products, how is that different from what you're doing in real estate? What does that process look like?
I mean, the process, the X's and O's, are you talking about like how would I market to find a seller who needs to sell their property?
Well,
as opposed to
when you're going for the insurance market, it's a completely different type of need and a completely different customer a lot of the time. So how did you take what you used in real estate and bring it into the insurance industry?
Yeah, well, from like a very, very basic pragmatic standpoint, so I was finding an audience of people who needed to sell their house. So this is way easier these days. I mean, any sort of advertising platform will give you your audience. But then I'm not selling insurance, really, John. I'm selling wealth strategies.
Okay.
So insurance is just a tool that we use to structure the wealth strategy. So if you're looking at just like basic term life insurance or something like that, probably, not with us. But if you want it to be a backbone structure that also fits nicely within your family trust, if you want to be able to use the cash value of that life insurance policy, so then you could arbitrage some of the interest. So those are the sorts of things that we sell. The insurance product is just a tool to get that done. So we're selling wealth strategy.
Okay, so this is a much more sophisticated thing in that case. It's more about creating structures for somebody to build their businesses around.
Correct. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So the stuff that you would see online. So get $500,000 in coverage for $25 a month. No, no blood work done. That's not my demographic. That's not, we would, not to say we wouldn't write that policy, but we would probably never find ourselves in that situation where we're competing against price and no blood work. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I understand. You're working at the better end of town.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, every one of them has their ups and downs, like if we were doing term insurance, we could turn on campaigns and we could just, volume begets volume, and we could just run through a ton of people and make a lot of offers. Yeah, I'd prefer to have a more sophisticated conversation with a better buyer, if that makes sense.
We've talked before, and you've talked to me about this concept of infinite banking. And I think this is something that's unique to maybe the American marketplace. I don't think it exists in the same form in this part of the world. Can you just talk a little bit about what that is and what it means?
Oh man. Okay. Well, infinite banking.
Yes.
This is a process by which you can collateralize the cash value of your life insurance. Okay. So when you make a premium payment into, this has to be a properly structured participating whole life policy. But as you make premiums into it, if you have enough what are called paid up additions, you can, a certain percentage of that goes to a cash value, meaning it's like a savings account. And a certain portion of it is going to go to your actual death benefit. So every time you're making a premium payment, you're increasing your death benefit and you're increasing your cash value.
Yes.
This is just a very raw version of it, by the way. So from the cash value that you have, you can borrow against it. So if I have $1,000 of cash value sitting in that policy, I can collateralize it. I'm not withdrawing it. It's staying put, and it stays put and earns a guaranteed rate of return somewhere in the 4%-ish. If you're getting dividends, somewhere in the 5 to 5.5%. So while you're collateralizing this money, your capital is safe. It never goes anywhere. And then you turn around and you collateralize, you go to your life insurance company, you say, hey, I need $1,000 to go increase my business by a course, whatever the case may be, and you borrow it to yourself.
Directly from the insurance company.
Yep. So if I contact my insurance company and say, hey, I need $1,000, they'll say, yeah, no problem. So long as you have the cash value, they'll say, yeah, no problem. And within 7 to 10 days, that money will hit your account. You can do what you want with it. I would suggest that you use it as a loan, pay yourself back the interest, and then go do whatever deal you want to do. Does that make sense?
No,
So if I know you're into vehicles, right? So if you were going to go buy a new vehicle and you wanted to invest $10,000, I would go to my policy and say, hey, I need to borrow $10,000. And then I would use that money to buy the car, and then I'd pay myself monthly payments just like I would the bank until that note's paid off.
So the insurance company is acting as a bank, and they are using the money built up in your policy as security on the loan that they're willing to give you.
So the insurance company is investing your money somewhere else. So your capital never leaves the actual policy. You yourself would be operating as the bank.
That's a hard one to wrap your head around.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Let me see if I could do it this way. If you were gonna go, let's just use the car example. If you're gonna go borrow money to pay for a car, okay, you go to the bank and they say, okay, no problem. Your rate is whatever, 6%, 7% in the current rate climate, right? Well, right now you can borrow from your policy, you can collateralize your money for roughly 5%. Okay. So when I tell my insurance company that I need $10,000, they're gonna give it to me, but they're gonna give it to me in a form of a loan. So when I pay it back to the insurance company, they want the 10 grand that I borrowed collateralized against my cash. They're gonna want that base plus some interest. Okay. So if I'm borrowing from my insurance company at 5%, and then I go use that money to purchase a vehicle, I'm going to charge myself an extra 2%. So I'm probably going to charge myself 7%. With me so far?
Yes.
And then everything above that, so the arbitrage between 5 to 7% isn't 2, that's a 40% rate of return on interest. So people ask all the time, well, why would I do that? Well, that's why you would do that, because you get a 40% arbitrage on your interest. That money goes back into your policy as it's not line itemized as income. But you do that enough and it makes a very big impact. So you almost have to take yourself out of the equation. It's almost like you have multiple entities going at once. Does that make sense? So if I'm going to,
because that money is not income, then it's not taxed, right?
well, if you earn a profit off of interest, it's taxable.
Okay.
Yep. Yep, it is taxable. So you would have to report them.
And this is a powerful strategy because
Yeah, so the two biggest killers to anybody's money are taxes and interest. So I know a lot of people like to just save money to be able to earn more money. I would just eliminate the root causes. So the root causes are taxes and interest. So if I don't have to pay interest out to a bank, if I could just have a closed circuit and keep that same interest circulating throughout my own economy, that in and of itself is a net gain. It's a net benefit. And then if I can move some of my assets out of my personal name into an entity name, houses, businesses, write-offs, etc., then I'll mitigate my tax exposure. So if I can just do those two things really well, if I can just mitigate my tax exposure and then really decrease my outward, like bleeding interest, if I just do those two things, you're probably better off doing those two things than putting money into like a stock market.
how well known are these kinds of strategies?
I think in the right circles, they're incredibly well known. I think, so let's look at this through the lens of like market sophistication. Okay. So somebody who's in like a 3 or 4. So somebody who doesn't really hasn't, they're familiar with it, but they're familiar with it just about as much as they've heard on this conversation.
Yep.
Typically, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to go to Google and they're going to hear that Dave Ramsey hates it and that it's a waste of money. And then they're going to say, well, I could get better in the stock market, and they're really trying to compare these things to other investment opportunities. It's not an investment. It's a life insurance product. That's why all of the net benefits at the end are not taxable. So you don't pay taxes on a death benefit, but an investment vehicle, you would, right?
Yes.
So again, I think to the right people, it's incredibly, they're very familiar with it. So once you get into a higher income place and you have businesses and you get hit with this tax bill and you're like, shit, I did not want to pay that much in taxes. You begin to look for places to put your money so you don't get taxed and how you can stop paying so much in interest. And that's usually introduced to you by a wealth strategist or a CPA. You're like, well, hey, here are just some things that you should put in place. Having a conversation with somebody like that is infinitely easier than having a conversation with an individual who made, 150, 200 grand a year as an executive somewhere. They're used to the 401k, they're used to the stock market, they're used to getting good rates at the bank. That's where they live their life. And we're on the opposite side of that coin of saying, no, you should probably not put most of your money in the market. You should probably put as little money into a qualified plan as possible. And you should look to close that circuit of outgoing interest and keep it within your own economy. Usually helps if that person's a business owner or a deal maker because they understand inflow and outflow of money on a regular basis and borrowing money for transactions. Painting that picture to somebody who doesn't do that a lot is very difficult.
Guessing as well is a kind of insider-outsider thing here, where somebody who's maybe an employee, even if a very highly paid employee, believes in the fundamental rightness of the workings of the system, whereas the entrepreneurial type tends to be paranoid and distrustful of all large-scale organizations.
100%. 100%. 100%. So we do a little bit of that storytelling. And to be quite honest with you, I just have enough calculators and enough like projections where I'm not guessing. If you wanted to compare this, like for instance, against any form of, I can put this into an index market and get an average of 7% a year. That's a big one from like the investment crowd or the Dave Ramsey crowd. And they'll say things like, well, I could just use a future value calculator and plug in 7% a year for 20 years. And look how much more money I would have. Except that's not how math works. An average is not every year. An average is an average. So you have to also take into account negative returns, fees, taxes, etc. So I just lean on proof a lot. Do a lot of storytelling about how it's been used for a lot of wonderful names, the Rockefellers, Walt Disney, etc. People have used this process for a very long time. And then I just use a lot of proof. Because I don't like to get into the internet debates about hey, we could do this, or if we did that, or et cetera, et cetera. I just like to get out calculators and use real life scenarios and walk people through case studies.
I got a question about the storytelling part, but I want to ask you something first.
Sure.
At what level of income do these kinds of strategies become viable for a informed person who is actually willing to test something new and different?
It's a really good question. I think it would make sense for the person, a business owner who made 200 plus. It is a really good place to start. And the reason I say that is, so for me, it's a much simpler conversation because they've already experienced some of the negatives around everything. Like they're already financing everything. So they see the bleeding interest going everywhere. They're already starting to look at sheltering their income in different entities. So that's a selfish answer. The real answer is, man, everybody could benefit from this. It's just wrapping their head around the idea of saving money and then collateralizing and borrowing against yourself. It's hard to do. It's hard to wrap your head in.
It's quite an alien concept.
It absolutely is. Yeah. Especially when you've just been indoctrinated to like, just take your savings and either put it in the bank, and they're going to do exactly what I just outlined. They're going to take your money and then they're going to collateralize it and they're going to loan it to John. So just do it yourself.
Okay.
And seriously, if you could just, so if let's just say you make like 60, 70 grand a year, and just whatever your savings rate is, just do this. And instead of going to the bank to buy your cars and your flat screen TVs and your vacations, etc., just become your own bank.
So when it comes to marketing these kinds of products, which are complex, and they're unfamiliar, things that are traditionally difficult to market, right? Complex, unfamiliar, expensive, and maybe there's a perception of being of something that there's a risk, the risk of unfamiliarity. Already. Being able to tell stories is a powerful advantage.
The best.
And probably not one that comes quite naturally to the native finance guy, right?
Not at all. Not at all. Most of them are incredibly technical. Yes. And rightfully so. I mean, I got to be honest. You want a very dry person as your attorney. You know, you want a very dry person as your CPA, and even somebody who's going to implement this. I lean way more on the sales side of things. And if I'm being completely honest, like I don't really like having the conversations with the clients. Let's have the dry person who's going to spit them the facts, have that conversation. But yes, storytelling. So we rely heavily on status, like really heavy on status. Most of the incredibly affluent families, structures, organizations, etc., are going to implement this at some level. So storytell a lot about wealth strategies. I storytell a lot about symptoms buckets. So I'm sure you're familiar with the symptoms buckets, meaning, you know, you find yourself in this repeated scenario over and over and over again. It is not the symptom, it's the root cause. And the root cause for me, at least in this scenario, is taxes and interest. And if we go down that root cause long enough and far enough, we'll find ourselves in insurance entities, trusts, LLCs, and that sort of thing. It also helps to identify behavior, meaning you are acting like a. So for us in this world, there's a really well-known trust attorney who uses the acronym Henry, Henry. It stands for high earner, not rich yet. And it's exactly right. The person might be making 300-400 grand a year, and they're never going to get to where they want to get simply because they finance everything and they pay the most in taxes. So they think they're doing everything they should be. They have the high-paying job. They are reading every newsletter. They're invested in all the high-growth stocks, and yet they see little to no growth, and they always need money. Well, the way they are set up and the way they are operating is what a Henry would do. So in a lot of the storytelling, I talk a lot about Henrys. Why are you behaving like a Henry? That's not what a wealthy person would do. That's what a Henry would do. So you get the person to begin to self-identify as something, a behavior that is not what they want to do. And when I list out all the symptoms in the symptoms bucket, they're like, holy shit, Maybe I am a Henry, and nobody wants to be high earner, not rich yet. Nobody wants to be a Henry.
It's an in-between status, right?
Right. So in one of their sphere circles, they're high income producing executive. They've got a lot of power, but they know there's another level that they aren't even really familiar with yet. And in fact, people would have an acronym for them. So if it's just a sticks in their craw forever.
Want to get to that next level.
That's it, man. Status. That's it.
Tell me about what's in the symptoms bucket. Pull a few symptoms out for me, please.
Oh man, this would always anything rate related. So if they're moving the same place that the market is moving, that's a Henry move. So rates are really low. I got to go buy a house. Maybe it'd be a really good time to just refinance your house, because anytime rates go up, prices go up. So if money is cheap, whatever you're purchasing with that money, it's going to go up because it's basic supply and demand. So when everybody's like, I got to go buy a house in the hottest housing market as we've seen in the last 10 years, maybe you don't. Like maybe you should refinance because the rates are low and that'd bring your monthly down, which is a smart move. And then maybe wait till the market is shit when nobody's buying, because you buy low and you sell high. But you have to be able to do everything completely opposite of what everybody else is doing. Does that make sense? So that's a big
Yes.
one. Yeah, like constantly talking about the stock market. There's another, listen, I know there is a time and a place for it. And I know some people are incredibly well versed on it on a day-to-day basis. And I would call those people like tactical day traders. And if you're really good at that, by all means, go do it. But for the average individual, keep that money close to you. History is going to tell us that every 7 to 10 years, 7 to 11 years, there's going to be a negative return. And when that happens, your compound interest stops and starts over again. So this mythical magic thing that they talk about as compound interest, it stops in negative returns. And then when you go to take your money out, you're getting whacked at the highest tax level. Anyway, seriously, I could pick any news article about anything that everybody would deem to be important, and just I would categorize that as a symptom bucket. That's something that a Henry would do. 70 some odd percent of people, elderly people, are now having to either ask money from their kids that are my age or move in with their kids that are my age because they relied on 401k, stock market, social security, etc. And now they find themselves in a place of like, well, shit, this money didn't last like I thought it was. The taxes are eating me alive, and my money manager gets a lot of fees. So, John, literally everything is a finance, or I'm sorry, symptoms bucket.
It must be quite difficult to get people to go against the grain like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a hard move to try and to pull, right?
Absolutely. Yes, it is. Yeah. So I just look for people who are already into this sort of thing. So again, if we looked at market sophistication and market awareness, if you're going to write a headline or an offer or something like that, it would be like, I wouldn't hide it. I wouldn't like beat around the bush. I would introduce the concept of cash value banking, infinite banking, be your own banker, whatever the popular term is, but with just a different angle. So most people look at this through the lens of being your own bank, which is cool. I just talked about it for like 15 minutes about the benefits of it. It also just insulates you. It is the ultimate hedge. If you just don't ever want to lose. A lot of people like to pitch it as the next greatest thing, like the fountain of youth. And I tend to find myself on the opposite side of that, as it's incredibly boring, but look how long it lasts. You know what I mean?
So
I don't want the people who think it's sexy and flashy and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I want the person who's been down the road a little bit and is like, I tried sexy, I tried flashy. I want something that is guaranteed I will not lose, and my future generations are going to thank me instead of yelling. You know?
the defensive strategy,
Yeah.
because that person has a longer time horizon in how they view
100%.
things.
100%. Yeah.
Because one thing that it flashed in my mind when you were talking a moment ago was how everything you've said runs kind of counter to prevailing culture, where everything's about consumption now, where what you're talking about is actually more about provision for tomorrow.
That's exactly right. I mean, I'm serious. I could run models that would show that if you literally did nothing else other than collateralize your own money to purchase your large finances. So if you buy a car every 4 years, if you send your kids to college, if you anything over like $5,000, if you just borrowed from yourself, you would net as much, if not more, than risking your money in the stock market over the course of 20 years. You don't have to do anything other than go to work and get paid and then use your own money like a bank. So you would net more because you're not paying taxes on the death benefit or anything like that. And you're always in a place of liquidity, as opposed to, well, I would do that deal, but I got my money tied up in a retirement account. And if I take that money out, I'm going to get hit with taxes and fees. If you're even like a remotely entrepreneurial, some sort of deal is going to come across your desk at least once a year. And wonderful things happen if you're in a place of liquidity. So between just financing your own large purchases and like having a little bit of cash for, the one-off deal every year or two, how sexy does that sound, John?
Love it.
Yeah.
What also strikes me about this is, as much as you're in the business of marketing these things, that this kind of the ability to market something like this doesn't come easy. Like you've had to be in this space for many years to understand and to see the evidence, to be able to tell the stories that make sense to the people who may want to go this way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in there, John. Yeah. So had I tried to do this immediately, like in 2010, it would have been terrible. Meaning the copy would have been bad because I just didn't know any better. I would have been trying to shove it down people's throat, whether they needed it, wanted it or not. And I would have burned through any money that I might have had, literally just trying to educate the market. And that's not, listen, I'm saying these things because I've done those things.
Mm-hmm.
And educating a market is a wonderful thing to do. If you have a big business with enough burn rate to be able to take that person from customer awareness, like 1 or 2, all the way to a client. It's wonderful. It's probably my favorite type of marketing to do now. But if I'd had limited resources and just needed to, make a deal, you don't want to educate the market. You don't want to do it.
Whenever I hear this, I think about when I was maybe 8 or 9, I saw my first Apple Macintosh at my uncle's house. He was in the business of selling software at that time, and it was new technology. It was like the Mac was about 3, 4 years old, I guess. Maybe I was young, maybe about 8 or 9. I remember seeing it and being wowed by it. I didn't actually become an Apple customer until I was like in my mid-30s. I was like, Apple can wait 27 years for me to get educated to buy their product.
Exactly. That's exactly
Very few
right.
businesses in the world can say that.
No, we need to make sales. So if you're a marketer or a copywriter watching this, your best bet, lowest hanging fruit, is a person who is just trying to shop. Like they already know what they're looking for. They know the problems. They know the solutions. You just need to give them a different angle or a different price. Yeah, the lowest hanging fruit is somebody who already knows.
So with that, the idea that, trying to educate the market is a losing proposition unless you have extremely deep pockets. When you are putting your campaigns together for your business, what level are you pitching things at? Who are you looking to speak to? What place are they at in their mind before they can be receptive to your message?
Yeah, they're pretty far down there, man. I would say 4. I mean, if we're using the 1 through 5 scale, they're usually 4. This person, like I said, is probably a business owner. And there are multiple use cases of whole life insurance, trusts, entities, that sort of thing, outside of just infinite banking. So usually when I'm meeting somebody, they have just received a giant tax bill. So they've received some tax bill, their CPA is trying to give them strategies to lower it. Rates are higher than they want them to be, but they still need to buy trucks for their business, or they still need to pay payroll or something like that. And they're not sure where the cash is going to come from. It's usually some sort of, I've just come from a season of where things are pretty well, but now I have this whole other host of problems that making more money just isn't going to help. I got to figure out a way to mitigate my exposure, because not paying 20% is worth way more than going out and adding an additional 20-30% revenue. So that's usually where I meet them. And if I'm being completely honest, I do a lot of stuff with other CPAs, other wealth strategists, a lot of networking, that sort of stuff, because that client, if they meet me cold for the very first time, which happens quite a lot, they're going to say, this sounds great, I got to go talk to my CPA. So I do a decent amount of talking to CPAs.
That was my next question. You preempted it, which is,
Yeah,
where's the traffic for an offer like this?
yeah, yeah. So postcards are wonderful. So I always feel like if you feel like your audience is not available on some advertising platform, in my mind immediately goes to Facebook, just because as an advertising writer myself, that's where I've got the most experience. But Google would be a wonderful place for something like this, because somebody's actually searching. And if you wanted to really dig your roots in, long form blog content that is retargeted to the next level would be wonderful for something like this. Or go find somebody who already has the clients, like a CPA in my case, or a trust attorney in my case, and they know they need to have these things done.
And that's what you've done. You've more gone from the perspective of, okay, who's got the client already? And instead of marketing to the client, let's market to the person who's got the client.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So how do you approach that?
Yeah, that's another good question. So let's use CPAs as an example. And I want to say, I don't want to misrepresent myself when I get started to talk about this, because what I'm about to talk about is a little less than a year old for me. So CPA usually has most of those clients. So CPA's business model, if you're not familiar with, is they file tax returns. That's what they do once a year. And if they have a business owner, sometimes 4 times a year. But that is their business model. So once a year, they're really, really busy. And they're incredibly important to the person, to the business owner, but they only get paid once a year. Once a year.
Sounds horrible. I want to get paid more than once a year.
Yes.
What do I do, Dave?
Yeah. Well, so this is what we recommend for the CPAs. Why don't we collectively get together? So wealth strategists, attorneys, CPAs, anybody that could collectively help your business owner client reach their end goal, whatever that end goal is. And instead of you only getting paid once a year or every time they file a tax return, why don't we charge these people proactive planning services? So if you are doing 7 figures annually, you need more help than just once a year. You should probably at minimum have quarterly meetings with your entire team. And if you're really doing a lot of volume, moving parts, lots of employees, that sort of thing, you should probably have monthly meetings with a proactive planning team. So Mr. and Mrs. CPA, instead of getting paid once a year, would you like to get paid every single month? Weed out 80% of your bad clients and only keep the top 20. Get paid monthly recurring and get a taste of everything that comes through from a commission or structure. So if there's a real estate, or I'm sorry, an insurance product that gets sold, there's a commission there, right? So I'm happy to share that commission. If somebody puts together a large trust, those could be anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000. We'd love to just share in all of that as well. So helping the CPA realize that their life could be a little bit better, work on much higher level problems for their clients, and get paid year round instead of just once or twice a year. Yeah.
And from everything you've told me up to now, and you talked about sort of the more dry technical person, so this is not something that you do alone. You have partnerships, you have a team.
Correct. I like to stay in my wheelhouse, John. I love to tell stories. I love to, I don't write as much copy as I used to, but if I'm ever sketching out an idea, I write a lot. And like, what's the angle? What's the hook? What are we actually selling? What are the belief structures that this person currently has that's associated with what we do? And how can we tell a different story? Even before real estate, all of that stuff. I mean, I had probably close to 10 years of fairly high level executive sales training. I'm a salesman at heart. So I always look at things through if I had this conversation as a sales conversation, what would I want this person to know long before they get on the phone with me? So that's where my mind always goes. And to answer your question, yes, I would much rather have somebody else take the phone call. I just want to help this team get as many phone calls as humanly possible. That's where I like to hang out the most.
Yeah, interesting you say that, because I've had similar conversation just about an hour ago with a client of mine who does something very specialized for a particular industry. And we had been successfully generating leads for him, getting them booking calls, getting them to show up for the calls, like getting 30% booking rate. I think about 60% of the book calls were showing. So it was all going good, very low effort. But the gap we spotted when they got on the phone, there was this authority gap where they knew he had something interesting. You know, they got hooked by our ad, but they didn't know why were they talking to this specific person. And
Yeah,
that's the next step. That's the next gap in our process we have to fix. We've got to close that loop. And before they get to the phone with him, they have to be
yeah,
educated about why he's the right person to talk to.
100%, man. I don't talk a lot about other marketers and that sort of stuff. Uh, but if you have not been through Andre Chaperone's stuff, I would just buy all of his stuff. He does a wonderful job of what he calls creating better prospects. And it's great. It's to make sure that when the sales call actually happens, that person is very, very qualified. They know exactly who you are. You have done, at least the process has done a wonderful job of meeting them in their beliefs and walking them backwards through their entire chain of beliefs. Yeah, because that's everybody's problem, John. As you know, I've worked on some pretty high ticket stuff with large volume of phone calls. And I can tell you that even the best of the best, the people that in our community, like the internet marketing world, that is the biggest struggle, is we are generating leads, we are generating book calls, either nobody's showing up or they're not closing. And I would venture to say that's just the distraction of the marketplace, meaning in that moment where I decided to say yes to this top end offer, whatever that is, name, email address, phone number, and the time the call actually happened, I totally forgot what I did because I'm distracted, because I have so much stuff going on. So our job as marketers and storytellers are we really got to step it up. Like, we have to increase the stakes, even if it's something very trivial. I can't remember where I heard this, but I heard this years ago, where it's like, even if it's a $10 product, you got to sell it like it's a $10,000 product. So by the time the person gets on the phone or decides to make a decision, they're like, yeah, how can I not do this? And I'm assuming that you're sending out the text response reminders, and you're sending out the email reminders that the call is coming up, and you're doing all that stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the gap we've discovered on the call is really an authority gap. And what we
Yeah.
came to realize that was for this particular client, that he's worked hard on trying to promote his business, but he never quite did. He never quite got there. But he personally has, through his own efforts of being just somebody who shows up on social media daily and attends conferences, speaks at conferences, writes for trade publications, he's built a personal brand without kind of meaning to, almost accidentally built a personal brand. And
Yeah.
so my one key insight with him is, why the hell do you still use your company name if your major asset is your personal brand? Why not just talk
Yeah.
about yourself? So we're
Yeah.
making that shift now, and we're doing a little bit more in terms of just helping people when they click it, between the period when they click his ad and they get on the phone with him, that they get to see a bit more of who he is and what he's about.
Yeah. What sort of stuff is going out? I have so many questions now. So what is the ad for a phone call? So is it an ad direct to call?
Ad is not, the ad is really simple, because this is a new initiative. I've been working with him about 2 months, and he doesn't have really any assets in his funnel yet. He's been doing everything through referrals and through networking and attending conferences up to now. So we said, okay, let's start with the absolute basics. Let's not go build out some complicated funnel. We know what we want people to do. We want to get people on the phone with them, and then he can sell them a consultation, and then he can sell them into a mastermind if they make less than a certain benchmark. If they make above a certain benchmark, they can become a white glove client that he can do 6 figures a year in revenue off of per client. And what happened in between was, okay, we just ran some lead gen ads for the two biggest hooks that we knew would be of interest to his audience. And one of them was exit strategy for their business. And the second one was strategies to become more profitable from that particular business without spending without a lot of basically reinvestment in capital, a lot of capex. More profit without capex. And so,
All right.
and both those hooks formulated in the language of his market in very simple terms. And we've run ads for those hooks, and they're hooking people at a really good price. Like, we're booking calls for about $30 a pop. And we're getting people to show up on the calls. We just aren't closing deals because there's an authority gap. So we just need to, between the period when they book that call and when they actually speak to him, they need to get a little bit of information about who this guy is, see him on stage at a conference. They need to get a couple of excerpts of his magazine articles. So they see, oh, this guy's actually published as a writer.
Is any of that going out in the autoresponders? Any of the email follow-ups?
We didn't even get that far yet. We just got to, we've just gotten to the basic level. So that's the next level, is build out some more authority, build some landing pages, build a VSL, and just put some more information and education into that process.
100%. You could I mean, you could probably do that if you had enough time. I don't know how well the emails are getting delivered, but I mean, I'll be telling that story via email before, from the time they opt in to the time they show up to the call. As long as the open rates are okay. Or, well, yeah, depends on what he would want to do, but they're fairly sophisticated. They already kind of know what he's talking about, and they're okay.
His business owner, his like ideal client, is typically doing somewhere, doing a minimum of 7 figures, and usually multiple 7 figures a year at the minimum.
Yeah. And they already know they have a problem. They already know there's a solution. They're just trying to figure out who to do business with, type of a thing.
Don't think they know there's a solution. They know they have a problem, for sure.
Okay. So after they opt in, is when I would start to is when I would do a lot of that storytelling. Almost
right away.
Immediately. Yeah, immediately. I love the fact that the ad seems to be, let's get on the phone. So the top level ad sounds like it's like, let's just hurry up and get on the phone. But you need to build a little bit of authority. So you could either do that long before the click, which is just a little bit more expensive. You'd have to build out, 3 to 5 pieces of content that look like ads, or ads that look like content, or whatever you wanted to do, or content that is just legit content, or just deliver it to them via email after they opt in.
Okay, so
if they
deliver via email after they opt in, that part's easy.
Yep.
But let's dig into getting them to the content before the click. So are we talking pixeling a blog post? Are we talking running some video view ads or something like that, and then retargeting people based on the views?
100%. You could do either one of those. So the video ads thing is really simple to do, so long as the guy likes to be on video. Now this would be before the offer. I mean, I guess you could do it backwards, meaning like after they hit the actual booking page, you could pixel them on the booking page, and you could follow them around with ads to then solidify their decision-making process. But if you didn't want to spend the money, just do it in email. Or yes, if there's a really, really, really hard-hitting piece of content, so a blog post, or let's just call it a blog post. Yes, the people who would read that blog post are probably very good candidates. And then you could just pixel that piece of content and then retarget a little bit further down the funnel.
Yeah, the interesting part is that and this is great. I love it, because I knew talking to you this evening would help me solve this, because you're talking to a sophisticated audience.
Yeah.
And I love when these interviews turn into a little bit of live consulting, because it's a real-time problem solving. I
mean, I know that like the high ticket industry loves to tell you that your good prospects are just going to show up and buy, and like everything's going to go away when you go into high ticket. Man, I've been in that world a lot on the consulting and copywriting end, and it's just not the case. when people are going to part ways with a decent amount of money and they have money, they really want to know that you know what the fuck you're doing. And if they don't, like, you can't talk them into something. No amount of black book questions or NLP like jujitsu on the phone is going to emotionally override their, I'm already a successful business owner, I'm not saying yes to you on the phone. So you have to prove your case. Like, this is when you pull out all of your really good marketing chops and you put together your thesis and you put together all of your proof. You solidify it with all of this guy's experience and expertise and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is all belief busting. So you have to know where they are from a belief standpoint to begin with.
This is interesting because one thing I've come to think and believe is a lot of the internet marketing and high ticket industry, it only works because they sell to weakness. Like they are looking, they're like the vulture looking for the limping cow. They want the open wound to peck at.
That's exactly right.
And when you're selling to a highly sophisticated person, in specifically like in business owners and people that, those people, they're not without wounds. I'm not, not naive, but those guys disguise their wounds.
Correct.
They disguise them and they armor them.
Yes.
Because they know.
And it's not a one call close most of the time. You know? Like,
yeah.
Anyway, I could go on and on and on. Like, you and I share very similar thoughts. I have still a decent number of friends who like to operate in that space. So it is what it is, man. It's a very cash intensive business that it feels to me like there's so much waste, to be able to, I mean, I know people who are happy to pay $1,500 per call, $1,500 just to get a call, and then berate the salespeople who can't get that person over the line on a $10,000 plus transaction in the first phone call. Anyway, I have my thoughts around that.
Let's not go there, but
yeah.
I don't know, because
I'd rather build a long business. So I would love to meet with the person who is way down the sophistication. So they're like, they already know there's a problem. They know that there's a solution, but you still have to educate that person as if they are level 1 sophistication. So even if they're like, no, I know there's a problem. No, I know the solution. Oh yeah. I've tried that thing. It didn't work. I tried that thing. It didn't work. I love that kind of prospect, because then we can actually walk through the belief structure of, I know where you are. I know what your beliefs are that got you here. And now I can walk backwards with you. And I'm going to use the term here, but we got to sell the shit out of this prospect, meaning not manipulate them, but give them every reason why this is the best solution you could possibly ever think of. I use the term act like an attorney all the time, because an attorney tells good stories, but at the end of the day, they're operating through the laws. You know what I mean? Like it's actually most of the time a black and white thing that happens to trail along with it a decent amount of emotion. So we're playing within the rules. So when I'm getting you to say yes or no to this, it's factual. And I'm already dangling in front of you something that you want. I'm just helping you get there a little quicker.
I'm going to pull this back to the tactical, and I want to ask you just one or two more questions before we wrap. And I really appreciate your wisdom. And I think just being able to hear you kind of, your thought process is very valuable, not just for me, but for anybody else who's watching this. If I've got, because the things you mentioned, the video view ads and blog posts, those are things that make, really good sense to help get this person feeling right about it. If the lead gen ad is already doing its business of pulling cold with wide open targeting.
Yep.
Do we want to mess with that? Do we want to put those other bits of retargeting and education after that in the piece?
I would.
You would.
Well, here's why I say that is that it takes this is without knowing the offer, without knowing, how much the product is. But if you're going cold traffic to a cold phone call, you have to have an incredibly astute person on the other end of that phone call. So the person who is taking that sales call needs to be a savage. So they need to have both the mindset of a closer and yet the wisdom of somebody who isn't just going to like break their arm if they say no. Does that make sense?
He has the latter, but not the former.
So,
He's
so
extremely experienced and
right,
knowledgeable, knows his subject from top to bottom, but he's not
right.
he doesn't have the aggression of a closer. He's more of a
So
diplomat type of character.
your problem is going to be, hey, John, this is wonderful. We got all these leads, but the leads suck. Let's just face it. It's definitely you, John. And thanks, but no thanks.
Actually, no, I'm very lucky. I've been there with this in this particular instance. No, he's like, these leads, he's like, he came to me, he said, John, we're talking to the right people.
Okay.
They just don't know who the hell I am. And once they
Okay.
know who the hell I am, I know I can do business with them.
So this one's super easy. Just whatever email process you have in place currently, just so if it's your thank you email, like, hey, you opted in for this thing, thank you, or hey, you just booked a call, thank you, start that process there, like immediately. So on the very first one, give them what they wanted, like, hey, you got this thing, here it is. And oh, by the way, over the next number of whatever it is, days before your call, and start the storytelling immediately. So add in there plenty of tension, add in there plenty of high stakes, all of these pitfalls and all of these traps, and how your guy has time and time again proven that these are very, very simple traps to overcome.
He's Yoda. You're making him into Yoda.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And if he likes this,
yeah.
here's what I would say, is that if he likes this and he's going to do it for a while, at some point you're going to have to do this top of funnel. So at some point, this is my thought process. Somebody can prove me wrong, I'm sure. But at some point, that offer is going to break. Either the frequency is going to get too high, or at some point that offer is going to break. So you might as well do the work now. Meaning, let's just break this thing down to the studs, and let's start at ground zero of nobody has any idea who the hell I am, what the problem is, and what the solution is, and just build it now, because you're going to have to do it. Currently, it sounds like you're working from, let's just hurry and get people on the phone, which is great. Wonderful place to start. It's your lowest hanging fruit.
We also validated that it could be done. I think that was the key thing we needed to do.
Correct. I've just learned over time that it's a wonderful place to start, but if you want to be around in the next 10, 15 years, you are going to have to start building out all of those pieces and make I hate using the word funnel because it's kind of got bastardized over the years, but you're going to have to build out a legit top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. They all need to work together. You have to start thinking from like a systems perspective. You can't change something in the middle and not expect it to have upstream and downstream effects. But that takes a lot of buy-in from the client.
It does, because it takes a lot of investment and time.
Yep. But at some point, it's going to need to be done. And this is what I would say to that, is that your cost per lead might go up a little bit, maybe a lot, depending on the market that you are in. But your show rate's going to go through the roof, your closing rate's going to go through the roof, and your overall return on investment or your ROAS is going to be way high, because you're going to be talking to more qualified prospects. If I could do nothing else, like nothing else, I would just create better prospects. That's it. I would act like I had, 3 hours to sit with that person. And I would chunk it out into like 10-minute sections. And I would build my case.
Talking to you, it becomes apparent that there's a gap in my ability to think in terms of systems for this stuff. How can I get better at that?
Just do more of it.
Okay, no, it's the universal answer that's always true, and the answer that nobody ever wants to fucking hear. Come on, listen, you're telling me there's no secrets?
Listen, man, when I was younger, I would have said just sell hard, because I always felt like I could just get a yes. But now, knowing what I know now, is that, man, your offer, even if some people are saying yes and it's red hot right now, it's going to cool off. I promise you, it's going to cool off. So you're going to have to either reinvent your offer every 6 months to a year, which a lot of people do,
Not possible
Or
in this instance.
or you're going to have to finally turn yourself into a big brand, something that you're known for, and you're just going to have to do all the work. Excuse me, you're just going to have to do all of the work. I feel like I have a decent amount of knowledge about all of this because I've been in every single one of the positions. I have done high ticket sales on the phone. I have knocked on over 3,000 doors to get people to say yes to buying a house. I've sold into Sam's and Walmart and KB Toys over the phone. So I just understand what it's like to be the salesman. And I understand what it's like to say, hey, these leads suck because these leads really do suck, but I'm trying to be a company man and say, yeah, give me more leads because it's great. And the marketing team saying, hey, we just generated a ton of leads, business is good. And the sales team is like, no, the business is shit. All these leads are terrible. So I feel like I just know a lot of this because I've done every position of them. And that sometimes the salespeople are right. Sometimes the leads do suck. And sometimes like the media buyer needs to talk to the copywriter, and the copywriter and the media buyer need to talk to the sales reps. And all of these people need to talk. And instead of point fingers, be like, well, how do we collectively make this person more knowledgeable about us and our offer before we ever get on the phone? And that's a gap I'm currently trying to fill. I'll let you know how it works out.
It's a good note to wrap on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dave. I always
Yeah,
appreciate
man.
talking to you.
Yeah. But thank you for the cash for connections.
Perfect. I'm going to stop the recording now, but I'll put all your details for people to contact you in the
Yeah.
video description.